Lee Do-hyun was having a terrible morning. His coffee had spilled on his favorite white shirt. He had missed the early train to the conference center. And now he was rushing through the crowded halls of the Seoul International Space Conference with his papers threatening to spill from his arms. 10 minutes, he muttered to himself, dodging a group of blue-skinned alien diplomats. Just 10 minutes to get to the right room. He clutched his presentation materials tighter, careful not to wrinkle the ancient imperial texts he had spent months studying. The conference hall was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Some floated, some crawled, and some walked on more legs than Do-hyun could count. But he barely noticed them anymore. After 5 years of studying alien languages at Seoul National University, the strange had become normal. He finally found room 507, and to his relief, people were still filing in. The room was smaller than he had expected, with about 50 seats arranged in neat rows. A simple podium stood at the front, its smooth metal surface gleaming under the bright lights. "Professor Lee," a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Park Ji-soo, the university's head librarian, waving from the front row. Her round glasses caught the light as she smiled. "I saved you a seat for after your presentation." Do-hyun nodded gratefully and hurried to the podium. As he arranged his papers, he noticed something odd. Among the usual mix of human and alien academics, there was a group sitting in the back that didn't quite fit in. They wore the sleek, dark uniforms of Imperial Guards, their silver badges catching the light. His hands trembled slightly as he set up his presentation. Imperial Guards never attended academic conferences. Something was different about today. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm Professor Lee Do-hyun from Seoul National University, and today I'll be presenting my recent findings on ancient imperial ceremonial texts." The screens behind him lit up with images of the delicate, swirling script he had spent countless nights studying. These texts were discovered in the ruins of an imperial temple on Mars. What makes them unique is their connection to modern imperial ceremonies. As he spoke, Do-hyun felt himself relaxing. This was his element. The complex patterns of alien languages were like puzzles to him, and he loved sharing his solutions. "The most interesting discovery," he continued, pulling up a new image, "is this passage about loyalty rituals. The ancient Imperials believed that words had real power. They thought that saying certain phrases in the right way could create unbreakable bonds." He pointed to a particular section of text. This specific ceremony was used to swear eternal loyalty to the imperial throne. The fascinating part is that the modern imperial court still uses almost the exact same words in there. Suddenly, the Imperial Guards in the back stood up. Do-hyun's voice trailed off as the room's atmosphere changed. Something was wrong. A new figure entered the room. Everyone immediately rose to their feet, and Do-hyun's heart nearly stopped. Walking toward him was a tall woman in elegant robes of deep purple and silver. Her long black hair was styled in the distinctive imperial court fashion, with strands of starlight woven through it. Her face was beautiful but serious, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. It was Empress Ainul herself. Do-hyun's mind went blank. The Empress of the entire stellar empire was standing in his small conference room. She wasn't supposed to be on Earth at all. Why was she here? "Please, continue, Professor Lee," she said, her voice musical but commanding. "I find your analysis of our ancient texts most interesting." Do-hyun's mouth felt dry. "Ah yes, your Imperial Majesty." He turned back to the text, trying to remember where he had been. "As I was saying, this loyalty ceremony is particularly interesting because of its lasting effects. The ancient text explains that the words must be spoken in a specific way. His academic instincts took over, and he began to demonstrate the proper pronunciation of the ancient imperial language. The words felt strange, but natural on his tongue, their rhythm almost hypnotic. The room grew very still. The Empress's eyes widened slightly, and the Imperial Guards shifted uneasily. Do-hyun finished the passage and looked up, expecting to see the usual polite interest of an academic audience. Instead, he found the Empress walking toward him, her expression unreadable. The Imperial Guards followed, their faces serious. "Professor Lee," the Empress said, stopping directly in front of him. "Do you understand what you just did?" Do-hyun's confusion must have shown on his face because she continued, "You just performed the Imperial loyalty ceremony. Perfectly. In the ancient tongue." His blood ran cold. But that was just a demonstration. I was only showing the proper pronunciation." The Empress shook her head slightly. "Intent does not matter in Imperial law, Professor. The words themselves carry power. By speaking them in the correct way, you have bound yourself to my service." Do-hyun felt the room spinning. "Bound myself? You mean?" "Yes, Professor Lee Do-hyun," the Empress said, and now there was a hint of something like amusement in her eyes. "You have just sworn yourself to be my personal advisor, the first human to hold such a position in the 3 centuries of relations between Earth and the Empire." The room erupted in whispers. Park Ji-soo's mouth was hanging open in shock. Do-hyun gripped the podium to steady himself. "But surely there must be some way to. I didn't know." "Imperial law is absolute on this matter," the Empress stated. "The oath, once properly spoken, cannot be undone." She paused, studying his face. "However, you need not fear. Your knowledge of our ancient ways is impressive. Perhaps this accident is not entirely unfortunate." One of the Imperial Guards stepped forward, holding out a small silver badge similar to their own. The Empress took it and held it out to Do-hyun. "Welcome to the Imperial Court, Professor Lee," she said. "Your new life begins now." With shaking hands, Do-hyun took the badge. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse slightly, like it had a heartbeat of its own. I need to pack my things," he said weakly, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The Empress nodded. "Captain Kim Ta-hee will assist you." She gestured to a stern-faced woman among the guards. "You will depart for the Imperial Palace tomorrow morning." As the Empress turned to leave, she paused and looked back at him. "Oh, and Professor, your demonstration of the ancient pronunciation was excellent. I look forward to seeing what other surprises you might bring to my court." Then she was gone, leaving Do-hyun standing at the podium, holding a badge that marked him as a member of the Imperial Court, wondering how a simple academic presentation had turned his life completely upside down. Park Ji-soo rushed up to him as the room began to empty. "Do-hyun, are you okay? This is incredible." "Incredible isn't the word I'd use," he mumbled, still staring at the badge in his hand. "Maybe terrifying, or impossible, or completely insane." Captain Kim approached them, her expression stern but not unkind. "Professor Lee, we should begin preparing for your departure. The Imperial Palace requires certain protocols to be followed." Do-hyun looked at his scattered presentation papers, his comfortable academic life already feeling like a distant memory. Tomorrow he would leave Earth for the Imperial Palace, all because he'd gotten a little too enthusiastic about pronouncing ancient alien words. As he gathered his things, he couldn't help but notice that the Empress's final smile had seemed almost pleased, like everything had gone exactly as planned. But that was impossible, right? After all, this was just a terrible accident, wasn't it? Looking at the silver badge in his hand, Do-hyun wasn't so sure anymore. One thing was certain. His life would never be the same after today's simple academic presentation. The Imperial spaceship was nothing like Do-hyun had imagined. Instead of cold metal walls, the corridors were lined with warm wood panels that seemed to glow from within. The air smelled faintly of flowers he couldn't name. Captain Kim Ta-hee, he walked beside him, her boots making no sound on the polished floor. "Your quarters are this way," she said, leading him down another beautiful hallway. "We'll arrive at the palace in about 6 hours." Do-hyun nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. He had barely had time to pack a few clothes and say goodbye to his family. His mother had cried, his father had looked proud but worried, and his sister had made him promise to send pictures of alien food. The room Captain Kim showed him was bigger than his whole apartment back in Seoul. One wall was completely transparent, showing the stars rushing past like streaks of silver paint. "Try to rest," Captain Kim said. "Palace life can be overwhelming at first." For a moment, her stern expression softened. "And Professor Lee, don't worry too much. The Empress chose you for a reason." "Chose me?" Do-hyun turned to ask what she meant, but she was already gone, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the endless stars. 6 hours later, Do-hyun stood at a window, watching the Imperial Palace grow larger. It wasn't a building. It was an entire moon, transformed into a glittering marvel of architecture. Towers of crystal and starlight rose into space, connected by bridges that looked like they were made of frozen rainbows. A small group waited for them in the landing bay. Do-hyun recognized Park Ji-soo, which made no sense. The librarian had been on Earth when he left. "Welcome to your new home," Ji-soo said cheerfully. She was wearing the formal robes of an imperial court physician now, not her usual simple clothes. "Surprise! I've actually been the court's chief medical officer for the past 3 years. My job at the university was just a cover to keep an eye on potential candidates." Do-hyun's head spun. "Candidates? For what?" "For this position, of course." A new voice spoke, and everyone bowed deeply. Empress Haenul walked toward them, her robes shimmering like the northern lights. "We've been searching for someone with your particular talents for quite some time, Professor Lee." Do-hyun bowed awkwardly, nearly falling over. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. You mean this wasn't an accident?" The Empress's lips curved in a small smile. "The ceremony required genuine intent and perfect pronunciation. We couldn't simply ask someone to do it. We needed someone who would discover the correct way on their own. Someone with both the skill to understand our ancient languages and the passion to want to demonstrate them properly." "But why?" Instead of answering, the Empress gestured for him to follow. They walked through corridors that seemed to be made of living crystal, their footsteps creating soft musical notes. Guards and court officials bowed as they passed, many giving Do-hyun curious looks. They entered a vast library. Books and data crystals filled shelves that stretched up into darkness. At the center stood a pedestal holding a single ancient scroll. "This was found last week," the Empress said, pointing to the scroll. "Our best scholars cannot read it. The language is too old, the dialect too complex, but it contains information vital to the Empire's survival." Do-hyun stepped closer, drawn by the beautiful script that spiraled across the scroll's surface. "I recognize some of these patterns. They're similar to the texts I studied from Mars, but much older." He lost himself in the ancient words, forgetting he was standing next to the most powerful person in the galaxy. "This symbol here, it's a variant of the modern imperial word for key or maybe gate, and this sequence talks about stars. No, star roads, paths between stars." The Empress watched him intently. "Fascinating. Our scholars believed it was a religious text about meditation." "Oh no, it's definitely technical." Do-hyun grew more excited, pointing to different sections. "See how these symbols are arranged. That's not poetry, it's mathematics. This whole section is explaining some kind of transportation system. The ancient Imperials must have had technology we don't understand anymore. Technology that my cousin, Prince Min-ki, would very much like to find." The Empress's voice grew serious. "There are those in the court who believe humanity should be conquered, not befriended. They search for ancient weapons, ways to enforce their will across the galaxy." Do-hyun looked up from the scroll, finally understanding. "That's why you needed someone who could read these texts. Someone from outside the Empire who wouldn't be part of the court's politics." "Yes," the Empress touched the scroll gently. "But we needed someone we could trust completely. The loyalty oath you spoke, It doesn't just bind you to service, it creates a connection. I would know if you tried to deceive me, and you would know if I meant you harm. That's why Captain Kim said you chose me, Do-hyun realized. You needed someone who would trigger the ceremony naturally, making the bond genuine. The Empress nodded. The old magics require truth to work. A forced oath would have been worthless. She turned to face him fully. I know this is not the life you planned, Professor Lee, but I believe you are exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be here. Before Do-hyun could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Captain Kim burst into the library, her usual calm replaced by urgency. Your Majesty, Prince Min-ki's ships have been spotted entering the system. They're heading straight for us. The Empress's face hardened. So my cousin grows impatient. She looked at Do-hyun. It seems your work begins sooner than expected, Professor. Are you ready? Do-hyun looked at the scroll, then at the Empress. Yesterday, he had been a simple professor. Now he was caught in the middle of an imperial power struggle, with the fate of human-imperial relations possibly resting on his ability to understand ancient alien languages. But as he met the Empress's eyes, he felt something through their new bond: trust, determination, and a hint of warmth that made his heart beat faster. I'm ready, he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Where do we start? The Empress smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. We start by showing my cousin that knowledge and understanding will always be stronger than force. Come, Professor Lee, let's make some history. As they hurried from the library, Do-hyun realized that maybe this wasn't the worst accident that could have happened to him. In fact, it might not have been an accident at all. It might have been the beginning of something extraordinary. The Imperial Palace's war room was nothing like the peaceful library they had just left. Dozens of screens filled the air with maps of space, showing Prince Min-ki's ships approaching like hungry predators. Do-hyun stood beside Empress In-nul, trying to make sense of everything happening around them. Your Majesty, Captain Kim reported, Prince Min-ki's fleet will reach us in 3 hours. They're not responding to our messages. The Empress remained calm, but Do-hyun felt worry through their bond. Professor Lee, she said, we need to understand that scroll now. The ancient star roads you mentioned, could they be used to protect the palace? Do-hyun looked at the scroll he still held. I need time to translate it properly. One wrong word could change the whole meaning. Time is something we don't have, Park Jisoo said, joining them. She wasn't smiling now. Min-ki's ships carry enough weapons to break through our shields. The Empress touched Do-hyun's arm gently. I know we're asking a lot, but please try. Use our bond. Let me help you understand the ancient words. Do-hyun nodded and spread the scroll on a nearby table. As he studied the spiraling text, he felt the Empress's presence in his mind, like a warm light helping him see clearer. The ancient symbols began to make more sense. It's not just about star roads, he said excitedly. The whole palace, this whole moon. It's built on top of an ancient transportation hub. His fingers traced the patterns. These aren't just decorative crystals in the walls. They're part of a huge network, like a subway system between stars. Can we use it? Captain Kim asked. Maybe. The scroll explains how to activate the network, but Do-hyun frowned. We need something called a key of starlight. The text says it's held in trust by those who guard wisdom. The Empress's eyes widened. The Imperial Library. The oldest section. It's actually called the Wisdom Guard's Tower. Then what are we waiting for? Park Jisoo asked. They hurried through the crystal corridors, now eerily empty as most people had gone to emergency shelters. The library's oldest tower was at the very top of the palace, its walls made of the same crystal as everything else. 2 hours until Min-ki's fleet arrives, Captain Kim reported, checking her devices. The tower was a single round room filled with ancient artifacts. Do-hyun felt drawn to a small pedestal in the center. On it sat what looked like a crystal feather. That's it, he said. The key of starlight. The scroll mentioned a feather that catches the light of distant suns. The Empress reached for it, but Du-hyun grabbed her hand. Wait. The scroll was very clear about one thing. Only someone who has proven their understanding of both past and present can use the key safely. Then it must be you, the Empress said. You understand our ancient language and our modern ways. You've proven that by finding the meaning we missed in the scroll. Do-hyun swallowed hard. But what if I'm wrong? What if? The whole palace shook. Through the crystal walls, they could see new ships appearing. Prince Min-ki's fleet had arrived early. Your Majesty, Captain Kim shouted. They're powering up weapons. The Empress looked at Do-hyun. Through their bond, he felt her complete trust in him. It gave him courage. Taking a deep breath, Do-hyun picked up the crystal feather. It felt warm in his hand and began to glow with a soft blue light. The crystals in the walls responded, their light pulsing in the same rhythm as the feather. The scroll mentioned a sequence, he said, trying to remember the exact pattern. Like musical notes, but with light. He moved the feather in the pattern shown in the ancient text. Each movement made different crystals and the walls glow brighter. The light spread through the palace walls like flowing water. Enemy ships launching first wave of attacks. Captain Kim announced. The palace shook again. Through the windows, they could see energy beams streaming from Min-ki's ships. Do-hyun completed the pattern just as the attack reached them. But instead of explosions, something amazing happened. The energy beams hit a field of light that had formed around the palace. The light swirled and danced, forming complex patterns that looked like the ancient script. It's not just a transportation system, Do-hyun realized, watching the display. It's the ultimate defense. It takes any energy used against it and makes it part of its own power. Prince Min-ki's attacks were making the shield stronger with each blast. The crystal walls of the palace sang with power, and Do-hyun felt the vast network of star roads awakening after thousands of years of sleep. Through their bond, he sensed the Empress's joy and amazement. She stepped forward and spoke, her voice carrying the weight of imperial authority. Prince Min-ki, you face technology you cannot overcome. Stand down, or watch your attacks become your defeat. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the enemy ships stopped firing. On the screens, they could see Min-ki's fleet turning away. He's retreating, Captain Kim said, sounding almost disappointed. Park Ji-soo laughed with relief. He knows when he's beaten. Even Min-ki isn't foolish enough to fight against ancient imperial technology. The Empress turned to Do-hyun, her eyes shining. You did it. You saved the palace and probably prevented a civil war. Through their bond, he felt her pride and gratitude. We did it together, he said. I couldn't have understood the scroll without your help. He looked at the crystal feather, still glowing in his hand. But I don't understand something. If this technology is so powerful, why was it abandoned? The Empress took the feather gently and placed it back on its pedestal. Perhaps our ancestors realized that too much power can be dangerous. They left us hints and clues, waiting for someone who would understand that knowledge should be used to protect, not to conquer. She smiled at him. Someone like you, Professor Lee. Do-hyun felt himself blushing. The events of the past few days felt like a dream, but the warm glow of the Empress's presence in his mind reminded him it was all real. Looking out at the stars through the crystal walls, he realized his accidental oath had led him exactly where he needed to be. There were more ancient secrets to uncover, more mysteries to solve, and somehow he knew this was just the beginning of his adventure in the imperial court. 1 month after the battle, Do-hyun sat in his new office in the imperial palace, surrounded by ancient texts and modern data screens. The room's crystal walls hummed softly with the power he had helped awaken. He was writing a report about the Star Road network when someone knocked on his door. Come in, he called, expecting Captain Kim with another security update. Instead, Park Ji-soo entered, carrying a large box. Special delivery from Earth, she said with a smile. Your mother sent cookies, And your sister wants to know if you've tried any good alien food yet. Do-hyun laughed, taking a cookie from the box. It tasted like home. Tell her the palace food is amazing, but nothing beats mom's cooking. You could tell her yourself, you know. Jisoo sat down across from him. The loyalty oath doesn't mean you can't visit Earth. I know. It's just. Do-hyun looked at the ancient texts spread across his desk. There's so much work to do here. After we activated the Star Road network, we found hints of other ancient systems hidden throughout Imperial space. The Empress wants to understand them all. Jisoo's eyes twinkled. The Empress wants to understand them, or you both do. Do-hyun felt his face grow warm. Over the past month, he and Empress Hanul had spent many hours working together. Their bond had grown stronger, letting them share not just thoughts but feelings. Sometimes, late at night while studying ancient texts, he would feel her curiosity and excitement matching his own. Speaking of Her Majesty, Jisoo continued, she asked me to remind you about tonight's ceremony. You haven't forgotten, have you? Do-hyun jumped up. That's tonight. I thought it was tomorrow. Nope. The formal announcement of your position as Imperial Scholar is in 3 hours. Jisoo grinned at his panic. Don't worry, your new robes are ready, and Captain Kim will make sure you don't trip over them this time. After Jisoo left, Do-hyun tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering to the ceremony ahead. The Empress had decided to create a new position just for him. Imperial Scholar of Ancient Knowledge. It would make him officially part of her inner circle, not just someone bound by an accidental oath. Later, as he walked to the Great Hall in his new robes of deep blue and silver, Do-hyun felt nervous but excited. The hall was packed with imperial nobles, human diplomats, and representatives from dozens of alien worlds. Prince Min-ki was notably absent, having been sent to oversee a distant mining colony after his failed attack. Captain Kim met him at the entrance. Her usual stern expression softened slightly. Ready, Professor. As I'll ever be, he replied. And you can call me Do-hyun now. You know, we've faced battle together. She almost smiled. Maybe after the ceremony. For now, remember, walk slowly, bow at the third crystal arch, and don't look directly at the Empress until she speaks to you. The ceremony began with traditional imperial music played on crystal instruments. Do-hyun walked down the long aisle, feeling hundreds of eyes on him. The Empress sat on her crystal throne, looking more regal than ever in robes that seemed woven from starlight. Through their bond, he felt her amusement at his nervousness. It helped him relax. This was just another step in the journey that had begun with his accidental oath. He bowed at the third arch, just as Captain Kim had instructed. The Empress stood and addressed the crowd. 1 month ago, she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast hall. Our empire faced a choice between force and understanding. Thanks to the wisdom and courage of Professor Lee Do-hyun, we chose understanding. The ancient knowledge he helped us rediscover will not be used as a weapon, but as a bridge between past and present, between cultures, between worlds. She descended from her throne and approached Do-hyun. Rise, Professor Lee, and accept your new role as Imperial Scholar of Ancient Knowledge. As he stood, their eyes met. Through their bond flowed feelings too complex for words. Trust, respect, and something warmer that made his heart beat faster. The Empress held out a crystal staff carved with ancient symbols. This staff marks your authority in matters of ancient knowledge. All libraries and archives in the Empire will be open to you. But more importantly, she added softly, so only he could hear, it marks you as someone I trust completely. Do-hyun took the staff. It hummed in harmony with the crystal walls, acknowledging his connection to the ancient systems he had helped awaken. Thank you, Your Majesty, he said formally, then added through their bond. Thank you for trusting me that day in the conference room. Her response flowed back to him. I knew you were special from the moment you cared more about proper pronunciation than protocol. The ceremony continued with speeches and celebrations, but Du Hyun barely noticed them. He was too busy thinking about how much his life had changed in just 1 month. He had gone from a simple professor to someone who helped protect an empire. He had discovered ancient secrets, made new friends, and formed a bond with an empress that went deeper than any ordinary relationship. Later that night, he stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The crystal walls glowed softly, and distant stars sparkled like scattered diamonds. Enjoying the view, the empress joined him, having changed from her ceremonial robes into simpler clothing. "Just thinking about how different everything is now," he said. "A month ago, I was worried about teaching classes and grading papers. Now I'm helping rediscover lost imperial technology and attending royal ceremonies." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The oath?" Do Hyun smiled. "How could I regret something that brought me exactly where I needed to be?" Through their bond, he felt her happiness at his words. She stepped closer, and together they watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. "There are more secrets to uncover," she said, "more ancient knowledge waiting to be found. The Empire's past is full of wonders we've forgotten." "Then we'll discover them together," Du Hyun replied. "After all, I did swear an oath." The Empress laughed softly. The most fortunate accident in imperial history. But they both knew it hadn't really been an accident. It had been the beginning of something new, a partnership that would help bridge the gap between humans and the Empire, between past and present, between two hearts that found each other across the stars. And as they stood together under the starlit sky, Du Hyun knew that his greatest adventures were still to come. After all, he was no longer just a professor who had accidentally sworn loyalty to an alien empress. He was exactly where he belonged.